Nuclear War Survival Skills, page 20. Chapter 1, Myths and Facts, continued. If additional halving thicknesses of packed earth shielding are successfully added to the 5 thicknesses shown in figure 1.3, the protection factor, PF, is successfully increased from 32 to 64 to 128 to 256 to 512 to 1024, and so on. Myth: a heavy nuclear attack would set practically everything on fire, causing firestorms in cities that would exhaust the oxygen in the air. All shelter occupants would be killed by the intense heat. Facts: on a clear day, thermal pulses, heat radiation that travels at the speed of light, from an airburst can set fire to easily ignitable materials such as window curtains, upholstery, dry newspaper, and dry grass. Over about as large an area as is damaged by the blast. It can cause second-degree skin burns to expose people who are as far as 10 miles from a 1 megaton, 1 MT explosion. See figure 1.4. A 1 megaton nuclear explosion is one that produces the same amount of energy as does 1 million tons of TNT. If the weather is very clear and dry, the area of fire danger could be considerably larger. On a cloudy or smoggy day, however, particles in the air would absorb and scatter much of the heat radiation, and the area endangered by heat radiation from the fireball would be less than the area of severe blast damage. Figure 1.4, an air burst. The fireball does not touch the ground. No crater. An airburst produces only extremely small radioactive particles, so small that they are airborne for days to years unless brought to Earth by rain or snow. Wet deposition of fallout from both surface and airbursts can result in hotspots. Hotspots at, close to, or far from ground zero. However, such hotspots from airbursts are much less dangerous than the fallout produced by the surface or near surface bursting of the same weapons. The main dangers from an airburst are the blast effects, the thermal pulses of intense light and heat radiation, and the very penetrating initial nuclear radiation from the fireball. Here's the picture of an airburst. It shows the light and heat. It shows the radiation heading down in pretty much all directions. Here's figure 1.5. Undamaged earth covered family sheltered in Nagasaki. It's in black and white. It's kind of hard to see, but it's undamaged earth covered family shelter. Many earth covered family shelters were essentially undamaged in areas where blast and fire destroyed all buildings. Figure 1.5 shows a typical earth-covered backyard family shelter with a crude wooden frame. This shelter was essentially undamaged, although less than 100 yards from ground zero at Nagasaki. The calculated maximum overpressure, which means pressure above normal air pressure, was about 65 pounds per square inch, 65 psi. Persons inside so small a shelter without a blast door would have been killed by blast pressure at the distance from the explosion. However, in a recent blast test, an earth-covered expedient small pole shelter equipped with blast doors was undamaged at 53 psi. The pressure rise inside was slight, not even enough to have damaged occupants' eardrums. If poles are available, field tests have indicated that many families can build such shelters in a few days. The great life-saving potential of blast protective shelters has been proven let me see. Blast calculation resemble an area of bursting. Oh yeah, the great life-saving potential of blast protective shelters has been proven in war and confirmed by blast tests and calculations. For example, the area in which the air bursting of a 1 megaton weapon would wreck a 50 psi shelter with blast doors in about 2.7 square miles. Within this roughly circular area, practically all occupants of wrecked shelters would be killed by blast, carbon monoxide from fires, or radiation. The same blast effects would kill most people who are using basements affording 5 psi protection over an area of about the same blast effects would kill most people who are using basements affording 5 psi protection over an area of about 58 square miles. Myth. Because some modern H-bombs are over 1,000 times as powerful as the A-bomb that destroyed most of Hiroshima, these H-bombs are 1,000 times as deadly and destructive. Facts. A nuclear weapon 1,000 times as powerful as the one that blasted Hiroshima if exploded under comparable conditions, produces equally serious blast damage to wood frame houses over an area up page 22 to about 130 times as large, not 1,000 times as large. For example, air bursting a 20 kiloton weapon at the optimum height to destroy most buildings will destroy or severely damage houses out to about 1.42 miles from ground zero. The circular area of at least severe blast damage will be about 6.33 square miles. The explosion of a 20 kiloton weapon releases the same amount of energy as 20,000 tons of TNT. 1,000 20 kiloton weapons thus airburst, well separated to avoid overlap of their blast areas, would destroy or severely damage houses over areas totaling approximately 6,330 square miles. In contrast, similar air bursting of one 20 megaton weapon equivalent in explosive power to 20 million tons of TNT would destroy or severely damage the great majority of houses out to a distance of 16 miles from ground zero. The area of destruction would be about 800 square miles, not 6,330 square miles. Today, few, if any, of Russia's huge intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, are armed with a 20 megaton warhead. Now, a huge Russian ICBM, the SS-18, typically carries 10 warheads, each having a yield of 500 kilotons, each programmed to hit a separate target. See Jane's Weapon Systems, 1987 through 1988. Myth. A Russian nuclear attack on the United States would completely destroy all American cities. Fact. As long as Soviet leaders are rational, they will continue to give first priority to knocking out our weapons and other military assets that can damage Russia and kill Russians. To explode enough nuclear weapons of any size to completely destroy American cities would be an irrational waste of warheads. The Soviets can make much better use of most of the warheads that would be required to completely destroy American cities. The majority of those warheads probably already are targeted to knock out our retaliatory missiles by being surface burst or near surface burst on their hardened silos located far from most cities and densely populated areas. Unfortunately, many militarily significant targets, including naval vessels in port and port facilities, bombers, and fighters on the ground, airbase, and airport facilities that can be used by bombers, army installations, and key defense factories are in or close to American cities. In the event of an all-out Soviet attack, most of these soft targets would be destroyed by airbursts. Airbursting, see figure 1.4, a given weapon subjects about twice as large an area to blast effects severe enough to destroy soft targets, as does surface bursting. See figure 1.1. The same weapon. Fortunately for Americans living outside blast and fire areas, airbursts produce only very tiny particles. Most of these extremely small radioactive particles remain airborne for so long that their radioactive decay and wide dispersal before reaching the ground make them much less life-endangering than the promptly deposited larger fallout particles from surface and near-surface bursts. However, if you are a survival-minded American, you should prepare to survive heavy fallout wherever you are. Unpredictable winds may bring fallout from unexpected directions, or your area may be in a hot spot of life-endangering fallout caused by a rainout or snow-out of both small and tiny particles from distant explosions. Or the enemy may use surface or near-surface bursts in your part of the country to crater long runways or otherwise disrupt U.S. retaliatory actions by producing heavy local fallout. Today, few, if any, of Russia's largest intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, are armed with a 20 megaton warhead. A huge Russian ICBM, the SS-18, typically carries 10 warheads, each having a yield of 500 kilotons, each programmed to hit a separate target. See Jane's Weapon Systems, 1987 through 1988. However, in March 1990, CIA Director William Webster told the U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee that the USSR's strategic modernization program continues unabated, and that the SS-18 Mod 5 can carry 14 to 20 nuclear warheads. The warheads are generally assumed to be smaller than those of the older SS-18s. Myth: so much food and water will be poisoned by fallout that people will starve and die even in fallout areas where there is enough food and water. Facts. If the fallout particles do not become mixed with the parts of food that are eaten, no harm is done. Food and water in dust-tight containers are not contaminated by fallout radiation. Peeling fruits and vegetables removes essentially all fallout, as does removing the uppermost several inches of stored grain onto which fallout particles have fallen. Water from many sources, such as deep wells, covered reservoirs, tanks, and containers, would not be contaminated. Even water containing dissolved radioactive elements and compounds can be made safe for drinking by simply filtering it through earth, as described later in this book. Myth. Most of the unborn children and grandchildren of people who have been exposed to radiation from nuclear explosions will be genetically damaged, will be malformed, delayed victims of nuclear war. Facts. The authoritative study by the National Academy of Sciences, a 30-year study of the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, was published in 1977. It concludes that the incidence of abnormalities is no higher among children later conceived by parents who were exposed to radiation during the attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki than is the incidence of abnormalities among Japanese children born to unexposed parents. This is not to say that there would be no genetic damage, nor that some fetuses subjected to large radiation doses would not be damaged. But the overwhelming evidence does show that the exaggerated fears of radiation damage to future generations are not supported by scientific findings. Myth. Overkill would result if all the US and USSR nuclear weapons were used, meaning not only that the two superpowers have more than enough weapons to kill all of each other's people, but also that they have enough weapons to exterminate the human race. I'm going to end it right there.